at the table political panel is Chicago Sun-Times chief political writer Tina Sfondeles, and from WBEZ, political and government reporters Dave McKinney and Dan Mihalopoulos, who I'm proud to say are my two former Sun-Times colleagues. Anyway, let's just get into it. We're talking as early voting has started in Illinois. The election's just a few weeks away. Tina, starting with you, what's the state of play in the governor's race?
The state of play is that we're seeing lots of money thrown around in this super PAC that is anti-Pritzker, pro-Bailey, anti-Mayor Lori Lightfoot. They have so much money with not a lot of time left. So you're seeing all these ads hitting Pritzker, not really super beneficial to Bailey. You see Bailey just got $2 million yesterday from Dick Uihlein. So Dick Uihlein is still supporting him. You see Pritzker still throwing lots of money around, pretending like it's not over, but he does think it's over, is what I think.
So, Dan, where is Darren Bailey spending his time now in order to try and just gain more voters? Is he going to base areas or trying to expand his voter base?
Well, he's come to the hellhole, as he calls it. He's come to Pritzkerville. He said he rented a place in the Hancock Tower. And he says that he's picking up the lingo, which has been sort of humorous to some people here. You know, it's a big state, and he's from a long way away, almost the other end of the state, closer to Nashville than Chicago. We talk differently than folks do down there, and that's not a problem in and of itself. But you also, the premise is he trying to really go beyond his base? Because there are a lot of positions that he's taken that got him through the primary very effectively, which are not popular positions in the state as a whole. But he's doubled down on those positions, which you could say makes him consistent and is certainly in line with what Dick Uihlein or someone of that sort would be paying for. But I have no doubt, don't take that the wrong way. I have no doubt Darren Bailey is authentic in his far right positions. But I don't know that he may physically be going to some places where there aren't that many Republicans, but I don't know if his positions have really moved at all toward the center. And I don't know if that's even the point of his campaign.
So, David, when I looked at just the number of voters who voted in the primary, structurally in the state of Illinois, there are just more Democrats than Republicans. Do you see any evidence that there's going to be that somehow Darren Bailey or anyone on the top of the Republican ticket has stirred up the independent or swing vote that exists in the state to just figure out a way to go after them, given the structural advantage that Democrats have?
Well, I don't think anybody in this existing crew of Republicans that is on the ballot in Illinois is doing that necessarily, but I do think the wild card, of course, is are the national events, the economy, and I think what we may see happen a little bit is that we've seen a lot of polls that have been out that suggest this race is a double-digit difference between the two candidates. What we may see is a tightening of that, and I think that may be a situation where people are reacting to the bad state of the economy, the housing market, gas prices, et cetera, and that becomes kind of a situation of like, all right, who is plan B here? It doesn't matter who it is. Who is the alternative to the people in power?
So we're talking a few days after the second debate. And I am a fan of the question that was asked at the end, as long as it was at the end, can you say something nice about your opponent? So for the three of you, who had the better answer? That Darren Bailey said he really was in awe of Pritzker's suits and he wants to go suit shopping with him? Or was Pritzker's answer about he admired the long marriage that he had? Or was it a draw? And do any of you know where Pritzker buys his suits? So let's start with Tina.
Okay. I actually like Darren's answer more because I think it could be seen two-sided, as in a little dig on, you wear these beautiful, expensive suits and I'm just this, downstate farmer. And so you need to teach me. So I think it was a nice little double-edged sword. I think he's prepared for things like that because he was a little stumped in the last debate. So Dave McKinney 4 years ago asked him like the price of a gallon of milk, I believe. Yeah. So like he's trying to be prepared for these questions that are coming out of all over. And so I think that he seemed kind of prepared for this one.
All right, and he was stumped on his walkout song in the first debate.
Yeah.
Okay, so Dan, what do you think?
So I'm not a big fan of the question. Frankly, sometimes it just is a bit cringy for me, the whole situation.
Oh.
Having said that, I do think that sometimes it's revealing, this time not particularly. So I think there were some other debates in other states where they asked someone to say something nice about their opponent, or the nicest thing that they could come up with at least, and they would basically just continue to insult them. And that is revealing in its own way, right? But in this case, I would say you're always best with going toward saying that you could still see the opponent as a person, even if you disagree with them on everything in public life, that you still see them as a good family person, and that we have no reason to doubt that's true, and whether it was sincere or not, only the governor knows.
So
I'm sure it was.
Dave,
why
can
not?
you find out where he buys his suits, or do you know?
Well, I don't know if he buys them from the same place Rod Blagojevich did. Of course, that was one of Rod's favorite things. I think they were Oxford suits, but I don't know. I mean, Tina raised an interesting point that maybe it was a dig about, Pritzker inexpensive suits. But when he pivoted to the line about, I want to go suit shopping with you, it made me think, well, man, anytime I've went out and bought a suit, maybe, I do it by myself usually, but maybe my wife tags along. But it's like it seemed like a little too intimate of an exchange there. I like Pritzker's answer much better. It just seemed more genuine, more sincere. And it's something everybody can relate to. It's, look, I don't care what your political stripes are, but you've been in a long relationship, and congratulations. And there's nothing wrong with that.
So
Well, I was gonna invite you, Dave, to go and get a suit shopping with me, but I guess we're not that close. We don't want to be there when they're measuring my inseam.
The reason I kind of did both answers were fine politically, and the most important thing when you in a question like that is not to make a mistake or say something that has an unintended consequence. I also thought that it was maybe a joke on their own, profiles that Darren Bailey had. And I thought if we're trying to psychoanalyze it, Tina, as you are, maybe it was his way of saying, we can work together. There are ways that people can still form relationships and go on from there. But anyway, not to dwell on that too much. If the debate is not going to turn the tide seems pretty mighty based on the WBEZ Sun-Times poll or the Sun-Times WBEZ poll. I want to say it both ways out of respect for our panelists and our institutions today, our partnered institutions. Is there an insight? One of the insights I thought we had in the poll is in a sense of how baked in everybody's views are, in a sense, for the top of the ticket. Dave, you and Tina wrote the poll stories. What's the main insight that you had that you think needs some amplification as we speak?
Well, I was most fascinated by the geographic breakdowns in the governor's race. Those, it showed overall a 15-point spread for, toward the governor's advantage. It seems like that's going to be entirely borne out, if this poll is accurate, by a strong showing in the city. Our poll showed that Bailey had 12% support in Chicago. And, anybody who's followed politics for a while knows that, a winning statewide candidate, a Republican, has to get 20% in the city to stand a chance of winning. And if you're that far below that number, that's a serious problem. But then you go outside the city and you look at the downstate numbers, and it showed the two of these candidates tied. And I think everybody was like, what in the world is that about? Because there was sort of I had a preconceived idea that Bailey was going to be, running circles around Pritzker downstate, and that wasn't the case. And then the other takeaway was the suburban, the Collar County numbers showed, again, a tight race, surprisingly to me, tighter than what I expected, because I think it had a 43-40 advantage for Pritzker. That's very tight, and it creates That alone creates dynamics that if it's true, it creates dynamics in other parts of the ticket that could be worrisome to Democrats.
So Tina, when you look at the numbers and analyze it, is the issue of abortion the one to explain it, or is it not the moving issue that Democrats had? Or
well, I think it's something that you saw in the debate, how you're seeing a different, you saw a primary Darren Bailey and you see a general election Darren Bailey, and he's not going so hard on these issues that these Republican voters really care about, which were guns. He loved guns. He was holding a gun and, advertising that he loves guns, anti-abortion, pro-Trump, and now all those things, he's kind of shushing them and saying, well, if I'm governor, I can't really do anything about these things anyways. That's not the message that we heard during the primary. So maybe these Republican voters are like, hey, maybe he's not who we thought he was. And I also think with abortion, I do think that maybe the polls aren't catching, this is an issue that affects women, that it's a private issue for many women, and you might not be seeing that. So in these polls, what they're really feeling.
Now, you just brought up a point that I think I want to get into with you guys from the debate, where Darren Bailey, as Pritzker said, was trying to have it both ways. Given that whoever is the next governor, there is a likelihood, more than a likelihood, of a Democratic state house and a Democratic state Senate, maybe even supermajorities. If Darren Bailey kind of concedes and throws his hands up, well, there's nothing I could do about abortion because I'll have a Democratic legislature, then isn't he saying he can't do anything? I mean, what does that do? So Pritzker, I thought, let him off kind of easily on that point. You'll probably have a Democratic legislature. Show me one thing you think you could get done, in Springfield. Was that an understated answer from Pritzker? Is the issue better? I think the issue is better than Pritzker seemed to use it, or I don't know. Guys, what do you think? Dan?
No, I think Bailey, was with Daley for so many years. Bailey has something of a point there. I mean, the flip situation of that is going on for years now, just north of us in Wisconsin. They did elect a Democratic governor who's running for re-election, and he couldn't get anything done because the state is so gerrymandered that even when they get a plurality of the votes in legislative races, the legislature is clearly on the other side and they shut him down immediately. We're assuming, obviously, and I think it's a safe assumption, that both chambers of Springfield remain Democratic, and I think Bailey is acknowledging that tacitly, if he hasn't done it quite explicitly. So I think that he actually might have a point there, but that does not give him a pass to state his position. And he may be toning down the way he's talking about some of those bedrock issues, but I don't think anybody on the other side is tricked into thinking that he's not, seeing himself as entirely pro-life, entirely pro-gun. But I do think that there's limited things that he could do, just as there were limited things, different things he wanted to do, but limited in his ability was also Bruce Rauner, the last Republican governor. It's just the reality. Now, I think Dave speaks to an important point when he looks at the numbers in the suburbs and in the exurbs, because those are some districts that are competitive in Senate races and in House races for the Illinois General Assembly. And maybe we are seeing some weakness there for the Democrats that will translate in down ballot races where people may be splitting their tickets, splitting their ballots.
Is Pritzker going to be punished at all, or is there something for the Republicans to exploit? He did say earlier this year he was going to have a special session on abortion and on the assault weapon ban, and now it's not going to happen. We're weeks away from the election. Do any of you think he will take up those hot button issues in the veto session?
I think it's possible. And I think, again, something that you saw in the debate is like him acknowledging some of the mistakes. You don't often see that in an incumbent. Like they try to fight it off. Like Bruce Rauner not wanting to take responsibility for the Legionnaires outbreak. So in this case, he kind of, when people point out things that he's done wrong, he says, I could have done better. And so those are things that the Republicans can keep pushing him for. So he is a people pleaser. And so you can pressure him into doing different things. So I think that's the kind of the route that the Republicans will try to take if he wins.
Ah. So I'm going to turn to like what's getting into people's mailboxes right now. So both campaigns have enough money that they're sending out books. This is one written actually by a former Sun-Times columnist that is put out by the people who, by Dan Proft's people who play by the rules PAC. You all know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yes, people who play by the rules PAC. This is the Dick Uihlein funded PAC, and it's pages of anti-Pritzker stuff. Pritzker had the money to put out a magazine on his own accomplishments. It's a lot to read. Do you think this moves the needle, having this kind of direct mail? David, what do you think?
Well, I know when I open my mailbox and I see any of that, I'll browse through it for about 2 seconds a piece, and then it goes into the garbage. And does it have any kind of lasting effect? No, because it all looks alike. It's all, that's the problem. All the commercials, all the direct mail, it all looks alike. And so I don't think that it has, a profound effect. I mean, look, if you're on the other side and you're in a campaign, what you're trying to do is throw buckets and buckets and buckets of spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks. And this is just part of that. It's a tiny little piece of it, that it complements the digital advertising, it complements the television and cable advertising, the radio advertising, on and on, and so that's the main thing. I mean, these people, they have money to spend, gobs and gobs of money, especially on the governor's side, and Proft too. They're looking to pick up straggler votes, the people who haven't decided.
And to that point, there's something going on now in the governor's race that kind of straddles government politics and our profession, journalism. A former political reporter for ABC, Charles Thomas, is doing a testimonial, big negative hit against J.B. Pritzker. It's paid for by the Uihlein-funded, Dan Proft executed, people who play by the rules act. And he's identified as a former ABC reporter. Journalistically, I just kind of, oh no, I just thought, whoa, because he is being paid for it. Tina, what do you think of that? And yeah, what do you think?
Well, we kind of saw this a little bit the last election. I think he was on WBON and it was very pro Bruce Rauner. So we kind of saw that going on 4 years ago. But in this case, the way that commercial, or there's two commercials now are formed. One of them has like an announcer making it seem like it's the top of the newscast. So that's a part that I think a lot of reporters take issue with, because in our climate now, where people do not really believe a lot of the news, to see a former trusted reporter, talking about his political views, that's not something that we do as political reporters. So I think there's a trust issue. It has angered a lot of media reporters in the city. Because people can question their credibility too. And as we know, he got $50,000 to do those commercials. So there's a direct payout to that. And there's a reason why he did it. And yeah, it's not a great look for the current political reporters in the city.
So what do you think, Dave, and then Dan?
Well, I mean, I think what's interesting that, Thomas is out of the business, so he's entitled to do, I guess, anything he wants to do. I think that, if anybody who's familiar with infomercials and the like, a lot of times when you have these testimonials that look so real, sometimes you'll see along the bottom of the screen, these are actors who have been hired or whatever, these little labels. That would have been nice here, since Thomas was paid $50,000 right ahead of this ad being aired. But there are all sorts of examples of people in after they hang up the spikes in journalism who go this route. I mean, you can look at Judy Bartopinka here in Illinois. She was a former newspaper columnist. There's a state senator out near Rockford on the Democratic side right now, former news anchor named Steve Stadelman. The Democratic candidate in the 17th congressional district, whose name escapes me, but he's a
Eric Sorensen,
former weatherman.
Yeah.
And then, go outside of Illinois, and we have in Arizona, the gubernatorial candidate out there, Kari Lake, is a former newscaster. So it's all over the place.
But that's somebody running for office. If Dave McKinney was running for office, then you ended one chapter and you're starting another. I think when you are using your reputation, I think this is, I know, Tina, this is what you said, and I want to underscore it. If you're retired and you decide to be politically active and give a testimonial, I get it. I suppose between the four of us, if we left the business, but you are, the only reason anyone wants you is because of the credibility you had when you were a working journalist. And would this be helped if there was just a disclosure? So when you talked about the advertorials, Dave, do you want under the Proft ad to be say, this is a paid testimonial?
That would be helpful, wouldn't it? I mean, I think it would give viewers a better handle on who exactly this person is, that he's, what is this motivation for speaking out here? Is it because he got a few shiny coins from Dan Proft? Might be. I think, what strikes me is unfair about it. And the Proft people will say, hey, it's fair game, because I mean, you look at news, you look at these ads and they frequently will have the images and voices of journalists reading headlines and what have you. This one, I know, it sparked a bit of a Twitter war involving Mark Giangreco, the former Channel 7 sports anchor, and then Ron Majors, the news anchor. Majors was, if you look really closely for a millisecond, you see Majors' picture or image in that lead into the Channel 7 newscast or whatever. I just think that it's in a way, it's distasteful, it's deceptive. As a journalist, I cringe at it, as to borrow Dan's word. I think it's just it's not what we in journalism do. I mean, I want to uphold my integrity. I want to take that with me to the grave. And it seems like, different strokes for different folks, I realize, but like, with Thomas now, we'll all look at him forever differently. Maybe he'll be like all those other people I mentioned. Maybe he'll be a guy who decides someday to run for office. But I just think it's he's portraying himself here as a journalist, and it hit the wrong chord for me.
So Dan Proft, if you're listening, just put it, say that it's a paid testimonial. It would seem to be helpful to people, or just somehow let people know the whole story of why he is presenting this. Now we're in our closing minutes here. There is a big ballot question. First thing people will see is a question statewide about a union rights amendment. The unions have been pouring a ton of money into a campaign to pass this. So far as we speak, there has not been a massively funded effort to combat all the money the unions are putting in to pass this. There are 3 committees that were formed to say no to the say yes proposition. Is this thing in good position to pass? Do you see any obstacles coming up in the last minute? And if a few million or multi-millions materializes, Tina, could this change the trajectory of the fate of this ballot question?
I think these are really difficult, and we saw that with the graduated income tax, that people are kind of scared when they see these questions on the ballot. Sometimes I think in that case, that was a little scarier because it involved math and trying to figure out how it affects you. But this too, I do think sometimes people skip over these types of things if they don't have a lot of information. And as you said, I mean, there's been limited information. I live in Logan Square. There are signs supporting it. There's union people around. So I would imagine in big cities and big suburbs, there's probably unions putting out signs and trying to do the best they can, but I'm not sure how they're reaching out to these other people to explain what it is. And I do think it's after the Janus decision, they got kind of scared about Illinois, what's going to happen to Illinois to union rights. And I think that's a little bit of why they chose to do this, to extra protect what might happen should the Supreme Court do anything else to unions in the coming years. But as I said, it's such a limited thing for people who are not in unions that I think it's been hard to translate it to people.
Okay, well, our time is at an end. I hope we reconvene to do more pre-election analysis. My thanks go to Tina, Dan, and Dave for joining in this edition of At the Table.